consider buying your processed oboe and bassoon cane from those friendly folks over at Barton Cane. Processed with care and precision for your everyday reed-making needs. Take the pain and injury out of reed-making by letting Barton Cane do the hard, repetitive, boring stuff. Free up time for practicing, happy hours, hikes, baking, and spending time with friends and family. Barton Cane, here for you. Visit www.bartoncane.com.
AC/DC Reeds is a one-woman bassoon reed shop in Minnesota run by Ariel Detweiler, producing over 1,200 reeds per year. Selling beginner and advanced level bassoon reeds, AC/DC Reeds are hailed by customers for their even intonation, ease of response in all registers, warm tone quality, and strong low register. Every reed is made from tube cane processed in-house to Ariel's specifications using Rigati or Lavaro cane and a Rieger 1A shape. You'll also find bassoon-themed gifts in the shop, including greeting cards, stickers, artistic prints, and the ever-popular Blackwing bassoon pencil. Make sure to follow AC/DC Reeds on Instagram, where Ariel posts artistic photos and educational stories about her everyday experiences with reed making. AC/DC Reeds is proud to sponsor Double Reed Dish, sharing positive and uplifting interviews to inspire and connect the bassoon community around the world. Find AC/DC Reeds at acdcreeds.com or at retailers like Chemical City Double Reeds, Midwest Musical Imports, or Reed Supplies Canada. Try out AC/DC Reeds today and let the reed do the work.
Hi, I'm Galit Kaunitz.
And I'm Jacqui Wilson, and you're listening to Double Reed Dish,
A podcast for oboists,
bassoonists,
and the people who love them. Hey, girl.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, just fine. How are you doing up there? Are you freezing?
It's extremely cold today. Like, I know that it's like Washington, so it's like winter. It's always been winter, but today it was like a low of 9 degrees. And it hasn't been that much. It's been like 30s. And so I had to go to work today and I stepped out and I was like, oh, good. Golly, Miss Molly, that is cold. It was not good.
Does it remind you of our time in Wisconsin?
It was a like Wisconsin cold for sure. But
Yeah.
we don't get snow here in quite the same way. Welcome to Weather Hour, where two women in their late 30s discuss the weather. What's the weather like where you are, dear? So what's new with you?
Yeah, we have some sad news down here in South Mississippi. My longtime predecessor at the University of Southern Mississippi, Patty Malone, suddenly and unexpectedly passed away on January 13th, 2023. And I wanted to talk about it on the dish because I know a lot of people knew Patty. And I wanted to, talk to all the people who knew Patty because she was such a wonderful person, like just a sweet, kind, hilarious, silly, fantastic person.
Well, tell us a little bit about Patty. What about her career?
Well, she started at USM in 1981, and talk about women having a hard time breaking into the workforce, especially in higher education. Can you imagine a woman getting a tenure track job in applied oboe in 1981?
No, I think about the first kind of what we think of as the first generation of full-time women applied professors, and I definitely place it later than that for sure. I place it in the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah. She taught a ton of people. She was universally beloved. She retired from full-time teaching after her 25 years and then continued playing in the Meridian and Mobile Symphony Orchestras. I think she started in Mobile in 2011. And she was just a force to be reckoned with. She was an extremely prominent figure in the oboe community in the Deep South. She was, her personality was larger than life. She was so funny and so silly. She was the first person to introduce me to the phrase "Lord willing and the creek don't rise."
Well, and you've told me in the past, I didn't know Patty, but her name was very familiar to me because you've
Mm-hmm.
told me how supportive she's been of USM and your students,
Mm-hmm.
even post-retirement, right?
Yeah, she has been incredibly generous with the oboe studio. She's donated equipment and music and CDs and money so that we can purchase gouging machines, and she has taught for me in weeks that I couldn't be there if I was touring. She has come taught the students for a week. She also taught freshman theory for a really long time, so just about every student at USM had the pleasure of having her for a teacher, and they all loved her. And the USM Oboe Studio is planning on dedicating our read room to her. It's going to be
Oh.
renamed the Dr. Patty Malone Oboe Read Room. You know, she was just such a wonderful, positive person to have around. I felt like I could go to her for advice, since she was so experienced and had a really long career. You know, this was her last season. She was going to retire after this season in Mobile and Meridian, and then she was going to put the oboe away. So yeah, it's a very sad transition that we're making, but of course, one that can't be avoided. And I just wanted to send all my love to anyone who's listening who knew Patty and who is mourning her passing. We're having a memorial for her on the USM campus on March 26th. And I'm really looking forward to seeing people who knew and loved Patty. Some things that I will remember her by, that I will miss very much, is that she was very, very tall, but it was all in her legs. So when you would sit next to her in orchestra, you'd kind of be the same height, and then you'd stand up. She would tower over you. I'm like, Patty, it's all in your legs. She's like, I know. She used to count on her fingers, like a lot, like very obviously. And I remember talking to an audience member once who was saying, I just love watching that principal oboe. I see her counting on her fingers. I think she's awesome. And she also used to keep time by tapping her feet, but like tapping her heels. And we sat on risers, so it would make the entire riser shake every time she was tapping. She was just the best. She is so beloved and so deeply missed. So if you are out there and you are missing Patty Malone, I just wanted to tell you that I am too, and the USM community is too. And we are going to honor her memory.
Well, she sounds amazing, and may her memory be a blessing.
It already is.
Well, switching gears a little bit, there's something else exciting, eminent to happen on the USM campus.
I'm giving a recital on February 7th at 6 p.m. Central Time, which will be live streamed, and you can check it out. I hope you will. And I am premiering a solo oboe work by famous composer, Dr. Jacqui Wilson.
Oh my gosh, I hate her works. Her pieces stink.
This one doesn't. This one's fantastic.
Yeah, so the piece is called Sipwe, which is a Sahaptin word. So basically, like, yeah, I wrote my piece Dance Sweet, and it was just kind of like a lark and kind of situational, but I ended up having a ton of fun. And I was like, I think composing will always maybe be like a hobby or a little thing I do. And I started writing a piece for you. And just to kind of like have fun and write for something that's not the bassoon. But I know that I played the oboe, as a hobbyist, not like a real oboist or anything. But I was like, I know enough to know like what's crazy high. I know enough to like not have you enter on a low B flat piano, like really delicate, like that type of stuff. And so I thought writing for an instrument that's not the bassoon was kind of like a little fun challenge. And yeah, so Sipwe is a Sahaptin word, Yakima language, that has like many meanings. It's family, relative, but also like friend or adopted family. And it was just kind of like this multifaceted word for just basically like the people that we're close to. And I decided to like, it's a two movement work, and enfolded in are all of these references to friendship and family or women's friendships and that type of thing. So there's some quotes and that type of stuff. Maybe we shouldn't give away. Maybe it's like a word search, quote search. But yeah, I'm excited and it was a fun challenge and you seem to like it.
I
So we'll
love it.
see if everyone else does too. But it's cool because it's the first time, I wrote for myself with Dance Suite and then I put it out there and it resonated with people, which is awesome. But this is the first time I've written for someone else and I'm very uh like I'm so excited. I can't wait to hear you play it and yeah, so it's kind of special.
Well, I'm not going to be the only person to play it too. Once this goes out in the world, you very purposely wrote it for an intermediate level.
Mhm.
So, and I think you really accomplished that it's a perfect intermediate level solo oboe piece. I can see a lot of young musicians diving into this piece. Um, and it's beautiful, it's accessible, it's meaningful. I mean, the first time you told me the concept, I'm pretty sure I burst into tears.
It's not too long. I think it's like 7 minutes, two movements.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And we're going to record the premiere and have it available on Jacqui's website so that you can listen to it for yourself if you can't watch the live stream, and purchase and take to your students and perform yourselves.
so yeah, if you're an oboist and it sparkles, check it out. And if not, it'll just be, Galit's little piece.
I'll
So
tell you what, every time I practice it, I feel so loved. I feel like I'm getting a hug from my best friend. It is the best feeling ever.
well, that's better than feeling like you're getting stabbed by your best friend. So I'll take it.
Chemical City Double Reeds is a full-service double reed shop specializing in the sale of instruments, cane, accessories, and sheet music. Double Reed Dish listeners can enjoy free shipping with code DRDISH. Visit them in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or online at www.chemicalcityreeds.com.
Specializing in the finest assortment of oboes, clarinets, bassoons, and their accessories, RDG Woodwinds serves musicians around the world. Their employees are all professional musicians who have a deep knowledge of the products that they sell. RDG's repair shop has an international reputation with a combined 100 plus years of service among the 5 repair technicians. Plain and simple, RDG provides excellent products and fabulous customer service. Visit them at rdgwoodwinds.com. They look forward to working with you.
We are so excited to welcome to the podcast Scott Poole, Associate Professor of Music at Texas A&M-Corpus Christi. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm humbled. I'm honored.
So to start, I have a question purely out of left field.
Uh-oh.
How did you get started playing the bassoon?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, when I started playing the bassoon, well, when I started in like sixth grade, and I was a saxophonist, and an interesting turn of events. I almost became a trumpet player because my family that I came from, we didn't have a lot of money or anything, and I, went through the whole line and said, okay, I'd love to play saxophone, um, but it's too expensive. I can't afford that. So I'll play the trumpet. That's a cheap instrument. I can do that. So I was having this talk with my parents, and we were with another couple, and they said, I think we have a saxophone up in our attic. And we're like, oh my gosh. So opened up this saxophone, and it's like years of, it's like a coffin, you're like, but I said, okay, yeah, exactly. Cobwebs everywhere, So I got this thing out, started playing it, and it's funny, it was a tenor saxophone, and everybody starts on the alto saxophone. So the particular book we were using wasn't set up for tenor saxophone. And in hindsight, looking back, I was like, oh, that would have been easy. I could have done this. But I got to play all these little solos, like the whole band would play, and then I would play my little tenor saxophone solo because it wasn't in the right key.
Oops.
And yeah, exactly. And like I said, in hindsight, it's like, well, why didn't I just play a clarinet part, or why didn't he transpose it? Whatever. Anyway, maybe he just liked me. I got to play all these solos. So anyway, I was a tenor saxophone player, and I did that from, sixth, seventh, eighth grade. And then in eighth grade, that's when they started saying, okay, we've got the bassoon, we've got the oboe, we've got the French horn. I said, I want to play the bassoon. I was very intrigued with it. I don't know why. Never heard the bassoon before, nothing. I was like, I want to do this. And my band director said, no, you can't do it. I said, why? He goes, your hands aren't big enough. I was like, what? And I was actually pretty, I was growing faster than my colleagues, my friends. That stopped. And then they, of course, went above me. But no, so I was like, what is this? And I figured out he just wanted to keep me on saxophone because I was the first chair, because again, in hindsight, he was the band director that took all these, like the last chairs and put them on the double reeds, which you would never, ever do. But he took people from the third clarinets and the fourth saxophones and all these things, put them on the double reeds. And of course they were not so good. But
he's like, let me take all these kids who are struggling with the easier instruments,
exactly,
and then we're going to put them on the harder instrument.
Exactly. And I'll never forget this one guy, and he sat kind of like right in front of me. I was on the saxophone, and his name was Bowie Arneson. And I'll never forget little Bowie, because Bowie was shorter than I was, and I'm sure his hands were smaller too. And the bassoon was just towering over him, and he was okay, but he never really loved the instrument or anything. And so I just sat there, and I would stare at him all through eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, saying, man, that should be me. I should be playing the bassoon, but that's okay. So
did Bowie file a restraining order? Why is this kid staring at me?
I'm like, peering down upon him. No, it was like I had a bassoon crush, I had a bassoon crush. Then of course I had the flute player crush, but that was like the girl on the other side, I was like, oh, but no, Bowie was my bassoon crush. And so anyway, I got going. I wanted to, what am I trying to say? I got going, wanting to major in music in college. I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And I was heavy into jazz at the time. And so I was going to go to this school and be a jazz saxophonist, as a music education major. So I was going to be a music education major focusing on jazz saxophone. And I got hooked up with some lessons with the college recruiter. And he said, you're a pretty good saxophonist, but we really need some bassoon players. Would you ever consider, and I was like, of course. So I told my band director, who actually happened to be the same band director. Like, he got a promotion. So when I went to high school, he got a promotion and became the high school director too. So it's the same band director. So I said, finally, look, this college guy this professor wants me to play bassoon. Can I play bassoon? He goes, okay, sure. So I got a bassoon. I started playing. And of course, I fell in love with it. And it helped me get into college. I got a little better scholarship than I would have before. And so that's how I started playing the bassoon. But it was somewhere in my junior year of college when I started my field observations and such. I was playing a lot. And I was getting a lot of gigs on saxophone, but I was also getting a lot of gigs on bassoon. And I quickly found out that I was pretty good as a saxophonist, but there are all these people that were so much better than I was. But on bassoon, I was actually doing much better than the others. And I was getting more quality and quantity gigs on the bassoon than I was on the saxophone. So I kind of flipped over a little bit. And at the same time, I was doing, like I said, my field observations. And I realized that I didn't really want to do education anymore, at least at that level. I definitely still wanted to teach, but the junior high public school level, I was like, I just don't think that this is the right fit for me. And so I flipped over from being a music education jazz saxophonist to a bassoon performance major, which haunted me for about a good 6-7 years, But
what do you mean? The ghosts of your jazz
well,
past?
and I tell people, I said, I walk, depending on who I'm around, I say, you got to understand, I'm a recovering saxophonist,
Hold the sax jokes. Scott's coming.
Yes, exactly. But no, it's something that's very dear to my heart, and I still love playing jazz, and every once in a while I'll pull out the saxophone.
Can we hear about what happened after you decided to pursue bassoon performance, embarking on your life as a professional, your training educational journey, how you got to where you are today?
Well, I tell you, when I was in college, my undergrad degree, I knew that I wanted to teach. I enjoyed teaching, but that level was just not my cup of tea. And for some people, they love it, And I was glad that I said, I don't think I would be really doing a good job at the public school level. But I noticed my professors having it seemed like they were just having a great time, especially my bassoon professor and the horn professor. They were buds. And it's like, oh, you ready to go for coffee? Okay, we'll go for coffee. And they seemed like they really loved their jobs. And so I thought, well, I might want to think about pursuing this direction. And then I was, of course, playing more bassoon, and I flipped over to be a performance major, and I was getting into all the literature. I got my Stagio book, and I was reading all through all the excerpts and everything. And around that time, the guy that I was studying with, he was actually the clarinet professor, and he had done bassoon on the side. So he was teaching me bassoon, but it was pretty quick when he said, look, I think you need to go study with somebody else because, you're taking this very seriously now. And so that's when I started studying with Carl Rath at University of Oklahoma when he was there. So it was about my junior year of my undergrad. I would finish up where I was at the University of Central Oklahoma, and I would drive down to Norman once a week to take bassoon lessons and kind of do some dual credit. And then I ended up going to my master's down there as well. But that's when I started getting really serious about it, playing in the orchestra and just loving that sound, coming from bands and especially sitting in jazz bands all the time. That the orchestra sound was so different to me, and it was just a special sound. Then I started getting into chamber music and chamber groups, and I was like, wow, this is just a lovely instrument. It's a lovely voice. This is kind of where I belong. And so I just kept on pursuing, and we persevere, and we try all these things. We do what we're supposed to do, and some things that we're not supposed to do. And then there's this element of luck, and you get lucky sometimes. And I've been able to get lucky in a few different places that, you go from here to here to here to here, and it ends up working out.
So you decided to go into college teaching, and you are a very experienced college teacher. And you also are into chamber music and recording and performing. So it seems like you could have gone in many different directions, and higher ed was the thing that has kept you, interested and engaged. What is it about teaching at the college level that you find fulfilling and appealing? And what do you think your students will leave your studio if they had one thing that they could say, I studied with Scott Poole and he taught me this? What would it be?
How to make a reed?
Yeah?
I hope so. Oh gosh, I don't know. I think maybe it's be flexible, and embrace diverse styles. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I'm remembering way back now. I said that it had haunted me. The saxophone had haunted me for 6 or 7 years, and you had asked a question about that. Throughout my master's degree and into my doctoral degree, I still played saxophone, and I played in the jazz bands and stuff. And I almost had to hide that from people. My bassoon professors did not like that very much. And I remember getting comments on some of my sheets and things that you sound like a saxophonist trying to play bassoon, and, I took that pretty seriously. And eventually it kind of flipped over where I could, kind of separate the two. But I'll tell you, in our current climate of styles and such, I am so thankful that I had that training in the jazz world that had opened my ears up to not just jazz, but Latin American music, South American music, African music, music with really intricate rhythm. All of those things I draw from when I'm playing, things like I was just looking at the Paquito de Rivera quintet, and some other pieces. Oh, I'm playing Miguel de Aguilar's music. You kind of have to have experience with those styles in order to pull them off. And really, what, like I said, haunted me for a while, I think has turned out to be a really good thing in my background. And so, back to your other question about, what's the one thing that one of my students, I would hope to say that you don't have to put yourself in a box like you used to. Again, back in the 90s and even in the 2000s, it's like, why are you even listening to jazz? Why are you listening to anything except Brahms or Mahler or, and if you're not doing anything, that should be your 100% focus. And if you're listening to anything else, that's a bad thing. But now I think we've learned to embrace that. First of all, not everybody's going to have a job in a symphony orchestra. And even if you do get a job in a symphony orchestra, those orchestras are now starting to play a variety of different styles. And if you don't have some sort of a background in that, then you're going to, say, okay, we got to swing this, or we have to play in a samba style. You say, I have no idea what that is. You're going to be at a disadvantage. And so in my studio, we try to approach different styles. I mean, yeah, you still learn the same excerpts and that kind of stuff too. But we do a lot of pop music. We do a lot of different culture music to try and open their ears to different things. And sometimes the students, they open my ears. There's a piece I've been playing recently, the past 2 or 3 years, that I just love, and that's the Jorge Mockert suite the Suite Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just such a beautiful piece of music. Well, a student introduced that to me.
Amazing.
I had heard it once. Leah Uriba played it at a conference one time, and I thought, oh, that's a nice piece of music. I'll put it on my list. But then a student brought it to me, and he said, "Can I play this? Can I play this piece of music?" And I said, well, "Sure. I've heard of it before." Ended up being a beautiful, beautiful piece. And I mean, you really have to be invested in the style in order to pull it off. So, but I'll tell you from the very, very beginning. When I say beginning, in my college years, my undergrad years, my dream had always been, I want to have a professor job and then play in a part-time orchestra. I mean, that was my big dream, so I never had a huge goal to go and be principal of the New York Phil or anything like that. And I've had a few orchestra positions and, but I've never been on the audition circuit, taking audition after audition after audition after audition. If one comes up that's local, that's within driving distance, I say, I'll go take it. But that's never been my goal. My goal has always been to do this job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then at some point, I could say in my education, I fell in love with chamber music. And so that's become just a huge part of my life as well. And having this job enables me to have the freedom to do a lot of chamber music.
You mentioned that one of the things you hope your students learn from you is how to make a reed. So can we hear a little bit about the nerdy stuff, your setup, your shape, your approach to reed making, and then also, habits or advice that you've learned along the way as a reed maker?
Well, that's difficult. That's difficult because it's one of these things where I tell my students this too. Here's what I do. Don't do what I do. Do this first, and then eventually, hopefully, you get to this spot where I am right now. And the spot where I am right now is it's almost like it makes no sense, But let's talk a little bit about how I got to this spot. So I had an interest in reed making from pretty early on. I got really lucky again, and I had won this little competition in Oklahoma City, and it paid $500. And I thought, great. I mean, that was a lot of money. I mean, it's still a lot of money, but it was a lot of money in 1992, 3, something like that. And I took the entire wad of cash and I bought all my reed making stuff. And so I started and it was largely self-taught I used the Popkin Glickman book and just kind of went, read that thing cover to cover and tried to dissect all the information and, ingest it as much as I could, tried a lot of stuff. And so I just started making reeds. And then, of course, I got some tutelage in my master's degree and my doctoral degree and such. But even as one of my masters, I took what do they call them? Independent studies. I took an independent study on reed making, and I tried all these different people's different approaches. And so I don't remember who they were right now, but it's been a long time ago. But I tried like 5 or 6 different approaches and said, okay, well, this is what yields this result and this result, and da 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 da. And if I do this to the reed, so I learned all these little things here and there, and I developed kind of my own method of reed making. And then in my doctoral degree, this book came out with the Lou Skinner book. McKay, I think is his name, that put it together. But and that kind of opened up my world into a whole different way of thinking. I basically was putting my reeds together, stay like step 1, 2, 3, 4, and the way Skinner would do it, it reversed everything. And so I was going 4, 3, 2, 1. And so even today, I put my reeds together a little bit backwards than a lot of people. And that's fine. It works for me. But I started doing that. And my advice is to, find a general shape that you like, work on that shape, and start making great reeds out of that shape. And hopefully you have a teacher that can help you along with it. And, say, oh, no, that's too skinny, or that's too wide, or it's too long, or, and so you kind of figure out something that you're pretty good at. And then you get really good at it, and just that one shape, and, you're doing everything. Then you start to branch off into all these different shapes. And so this place that I am now, I should have give you a picture or something. I got like 25 different shapers that I use. And if you look at my reed box, there are reeds that are long and short and wide and skinny and all different flavors. So like I said, I do not recommend that for somebody starting out. But in my position, I might have to play chamber music today. I might have to play second bassoon in the orchestra next week. I might have to play a solo recital in 2 weeks, and I might get called to play a principal job somewhere. So I have all these different roles that I have to fit into, and at any given time, I've got a reed that will work for that situation. And so I still do a lot of experimenting, and I've given myself kind of when I reach this age, I'm gonna stop and just play one reed. That's it. Don't you ask me what age that is, Galit. I can see it in your, yes. I can see you thinking. No, but until that day comes, I'm just going to keep on experimenting and, kind of see. And what I've learned from this is, there's a lot of, I guess I wouldn't call them myths. There's a lot of truth to some of the myths that we have, but a lot of the stuff that we look at as far as reeds go, and we say, oh, well, this is too straight, or this is too warped, or this is too thick, or this is too thin, or this is too mealy, or this is you could play on just about anything if you know how to manipulate the cane, and you can make it work for you. Again, kind of growing up with not a lot of money, I won't throw a reed away. And so a lot of people, my philosophy in reeds is, a lot of people will make 100 reeds and they hope that 10 of them work. So that's about a 10% return. I like to make 10 reeds and make 9 of them work. So that's more like a 90% return. Because again, if I pay, what is it, like, I think a piece of cane is like up to $6, $6.50, something like that. And I don't want to throw away $6 every time just because I do it. I shave it down. This is terrible. Throw it away. Yeah. So, and I kind of try to get my students to do that as well. It's like, don't just throw it away. Let's see if we can make it work, so.
Yeah, that's something that actually Erin Oft and I have talked about a lot. She has a similar perspective, and for me, it ultimately, segues easily into a decolonial approach to reed making, that respecting that this thing was once alive, and that just because it doesn't suit our purpose doesn't entitle us to just throw it away and say, oh, you have no use to me, therefore, I get to disregard you. Like, and, her reed making is very similar, of like, how can I respond to who you are, to learn what I can from you, whether that's helping a student or, helping myself or whatever it is. But I would love to hear, that kind of segues nicely into, you grow Arundodonax, right? Can we hear about all of that? I don't even know where to begin. Like, tell us about that.
Well, I don't actually grow it myself. Now, there are some people that do. But what got me interested in harvesting the Arundo is when I moved to Texas, I noticed it growing wild when I was living up in North Texas. And it would have these little spots here and there, sometimes along the side of the road. And you'd see these little, I wouldn't call it a grove. I don't know what you call it. Just a little crop, maybe 12, 15 pieces. But then there was, we would drive down to San Antonio every year for the Texas Music Educators Convention. And on the way down, I found this huge forest of Arundodonax. And I thought, wow, then that's got to be something special. So I did my research. Most of it is from Mark Eubanks, his website. He has a ton of great information on harvesting, when to harvest, how to dry it, all that kind of stuff. And it's really great. And then I learned a lot from an oboist. Do you know Neil Tapman, who used to teach at Arizona? He was over on the West Coast. And he and I were talking about it. And I said, well, I learned all this stuff from Mark Eubanks' website. And da, da, da. He goes, oh, I told Mark everything he knows. so I was like, oh, great. Well, let's talk about reeds and stuff. How do you, because he would harvest for his oboe cane. And so luckily here in Texas, there are a variety of spots where the cane grows very well. It also grows in California quite a bit. There are people, Dave Wells, Steve Braunstein, they go out in the California Bay Area where it grows. And then it also grows along the Rio Grande quite a bit. I did a trip to Big Bend a couple of years ago, and there was just enormous fields of it all over the Rio Grande River. Unfortunately, none of it was of proper diameter, and that's where it gets tricky. So a lot of people, when we talk about it, they think you just go out and grab a piece of cane off the side of the road, and that's sort of true. But what you have to do is you have to go through and you kind of have to sift through the field and look through and find these pieces that have ideal diameter. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I learned is, so the cane has to be at least 2 years old, and it has to be a certain diameter. And what I found is once it reaches that diameter, it's very, very close to dying. In other words, you have to have that kind of a special window of time, because, in other words, it doesn't just keep on growing. Once it reaches that special diameter, then if you come back the next year, it's probably going to be dead. So you've got this little window of time to grab some cane, and there are magical times when you can go out during the winter. You have to go in the dormant season, and then you have to go by the well, not the light of the moon, but the darkness, I guess, of the new moon. All kinds of fun stuff there. So then you go out and you find your ideal pieces, you chop them down, and then they have to cure for 2 years. And so this batch it's ready to be, the reason it's in my office is that it's ready to be chopped up into individual tubes. And so, but it's been sitting there for 2 or 3 years now. And so when I first started, it was really, it was like, oh, I can't wait 2 years. I can't wait. But I had to make myself wait. And now, so when I go out and I harvest, say in January, I've got cane that I harvested 2 years ago that's already ready to go. And so it's kind of, now I've got a cycle of cane that's going on. And I think it's great cane. It's a little, it doesn't have this golden, beautiful color to it that a lot of cane that we use has, which got me to thinking that there's so much, I think, that when we choose cane and when we look at cane and we go to buy cane and stuff, there's this aesthetic quality that we're looking at that really has nothing to do with the way it plays. And I've seen cane that is just absolutely beautiful and it doesn't play well at all. Mm-hmm. And then I've used cane that doesn't look so good. There's no way you could sell it because nobody would buy this stuff. It looks terrible. But the sound is beautiful, and it's vibrant and wonderful. So there's a lot of this stuff where I'm thinking, how much are we just looking at the aesthetics of the cane and judging it that way, and instead of giving it. Now I can see the parallels here, where give this poor little ugly reed a chance. Oh, you got a little dark spot. That's okay. Let's see how you can play. where I'm a very inclusive reed maker. So yeah.
I like it.
But yeah, it's just, so much of it is, what I've learned is that even if you follow every single, guideline of choosing your cane, that still doesn't mean that it's going to be a good reed.
Right.
And some of those reeds that don't match all the guidelines, or I should say that some of those pieces of cane that people throw away, or they say, oh, I'll put this in the discard pile, those could actually be really great pieces of cane. And so another reason that I go out and I harvest much more than what I need is so that I can give it to my students. And so they don't have to pay for cane, which is great. You know, and I say, I give them about 15, 20 pieces at a time and say, go make some reeds. And they don't have to spend a bunch of money to do it.
Is Arundodonax a sustainable foraging target? Do you know if it's, what's the word? Invasive. Is it an invasive species? Should we go out there foraging for Arundodonax?
Well, if you're out there chopping it down yourself, you're doing somebody else a favor. Because yes, it's an invasive species. And that, Dale Clark in Arkansas, he actually planted some and he's grown some, and so I think he's had some really good success with it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I would hate to be your neighbor, because at some point that stuff is going to grow and spread, and you cannot control it. And it's an invasive species. The state of California has gone to great lengths to try to get rid of it because it chokes out the water supply.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so and there's an interesting bit of information that I think would be cool here for the podcast and stuff that I read, is that the reason it grows so well, or that there's so much of it in the Rio Grande Valley, is that it was planted there by the government way back around World War II. I forget if it was World War I or World War II, but they started this planting in order for it to be a sustainable source of fiber. You can cut this stuff down and, grind it down to a pulp, and you can make clothing out of it. You can make all kinds of things out of it. And so as America was really concerned, like, what if we lose the war? We're going to be cut off from all these sources of, materials. Arundodonax can be used as, like I said, you can make clothes out of it. You can make materials out of it. When you grind it into a pulp, it can be used for all kinds of different things. So that's why they planted it, but it got way out of control. And so, yeah, it's an invasive species, but as long as I can see pieces out there on the side of the road, and I have my own special grove here in Corpus Christi. When I say special, I mean, I don't own it, but it's a little park, and it's one of the largest groves I've ever seen. And so I go out there every year and take 5 or 6 pieces from it. But the other thing that makes it good in Texas, that is the wind. And Corpus Christi is like one of the windiest cities ever in the United States. And so this wind that comes off the bay and off the ocean, it helps strengthen the cane. And so you want that. There's a thread about somebody who said, oh, I'm going to start growing Arundodonax in my, I've got a space in my home. And they said, well, it grows to like 20 feet or so. And he's like, oh, yeah. I've already planned for that. But you have to have the wind. The wind has to be there, in order to help it get strength and flexibility. The flexibility is a big thing too. Before we get off that topic, I'm going to tempt you, Jacqui. There are a few things I didn't tell you, secrets of the trade. And the only way you can learn them is to come down to Corpus Christi and go on a cane harvest with me.
I'll take
What,
you.
am I not invited?
No.
Y'all just got little tubes.
Yeah. I have found that the oboists are very, very picky. Like,
no.
Shocker.
I know.
I don't believe it. You're out of line here.
And dare I say it, a little bit snotty when it comes to choosing their cane.
I am shocked, offended, and in disbelief.
That would
Also,
never come from an oboist, right?
I'm also not the biggest fan of wandering around in groves, so I'll leave you two to it.
Oh. You do have to wear strong boots
Ugh,
for the snakes
snake!
and spiders
Oh God.
and
Yeah, you
critters.
guys have a great time.
Okay, enough about reeds.
Can we hear about your album of unaccompanied pieces for solo bassoon?
Sure. What do you want to know?
Tell us about the process, selecting repertoire, all that good stuff.
Oh God, the that was actually one of the hardest parts about the whole project because I wanted to do in my mind I have this series of projects and I'm on part 2 right now, and that's the next album. And so the first album was going to be unaccompanied. The next one is duets, trios, quartets, quintets, just configurations of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instruments. So I started with unaccompanied, and going through the repertoire, those were the hardest decisions because it was like, wow, how can I put this on and not put this on? And my decisions came, kind of worked their way down to, I didn't want to make recordings of things that were already out there and recorded a bunch. Nobody needs to hear me play another, of this piece, but there are some standards, and the standards that I chose to put on there, I thought were, okay, here are some pieces that need some updating, like I'm thinking of, I think it's Schoenbach. I'd have to go back and look, but I think there's this fabulous recording of Schoenbach playing the Wilson Osborne Rhapsody. And there are a few other really fine recordings, but recording technology has really changed in the past, 40, 50 years. And so I thought that was a piece that needed an update, not to say, here's my rendition of it, but, it's like, okay, well, let's hear what that piece could have sounded like with modern recording technology. So there are a few standards on the album. And then there are some pieces that are little known, I guess. And then there are a few pieces that were commissions that I did. So I tried to make a mix of all those. Instead of having a piece that's just all pieces that I commissioned, nobody wants to hear that. So, and then if it's a piece of all standards, I don't know if, I wouldn't want to be judged too harshly, and then so I tried to get a mix of pieces to put on it. And then, when I started looking at, okay, how's this going to flow? Because that's another thing that I'm still of the generation and of the belief that, when I was a kid listening to cassette tapes, I would start from the beginning and go all the way to the end, and so envisioning this kind of album as a true album, that it's not just a bunch of pieces thrown on a piece, it's got an arc to it that goes from the beginning to the very end. And so a lot of pieces that didn't make the cut, it's not that they weren't good pieces, but it's like, how is that going to fit into the whole texture of the thing? And then one other thing that I did was I said, well, I want the public to have a say too. So I put out a poll on Facebook and I said, what is a piece an unaccompanied piece that you feel should go on this album? Like, no, it's either under recorded or people need to know about this piece, and it hasn't been recorded, something like that. And so I got all these nice responses back, lots of pieces I hadn't heard before, and then we kind of narrowed it down to 2 or 3, and I think I put a vote out and said, okay, out of these 2 or 3 pieces, which one would you want to see? And the piece that got chosen with that one was Libby Larson's Jazz Variations. Mm-hmm. And I was so glad to have discovered it for myself, because a lot of other people already knew about it. And they said, this is becoming a new standard in our repertoire. And I thought, well, I don't know this piece at all. let me check it out. So I was so glad that people had recommended it to me, and that they thought that it was worthy of, publication to where people, to a broader audience. And I love the piece. It's great. So yeah.
Well, first of all, I love the idea of one instrument and then two instruments and then three and then four. It's very liggity and I love it. Would you share with us a favorite memory of a past performance?
I have two. One is very old and one is very recent. Because I think it shows just how important this thing that we do with music is really, it's such a special thing that we do. My first performance, I wasn't even playing, and I was sitting in the middle of the orchestra, and we were on tour. And this was when I was in an undergrad in college. I think our orchestra was pretty good, but I mean, it wasn't great. It's a college level orchestra, But I sat there and they were playing Barber's Adagio for strings. Mm. And I was just sitting there listening, because we didn't have time to move the stage or anything. Like I said, we were on tour. It was tight setting. We had to go from one piece to the other. So all the winds just sat there while the strings played this piece of music. And so I just sat there, and we had gone out and done some college age things the night before and in the hotel. And I'm just kind of sitting there half tired. And this sound just overwhelmed me of these strings, and the floor was vibrating, and they were all together. And I mean, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, here you have an incredibly moving piece of music, but then also I've got the best seat in the house. I mean, I'm sitting in the middle of the orchestra and all these strings are around me and the sound is going everywhere. And it was just this incredibly moving moment for me that makes the whole musical career make sense. That I'd say a good 80 to 90% of what we sit through it's good. It's fine, but it's not, it's not that kind of great. But this was great, at least to me. Now, if I were the age that I am now, listening to that, I would probably say, oh, well, the violas are out of tune, and well, the basses missed that entrance, and yeah, you start to, But at that time in my life, when my experiences were not huge, that was a huge thing for me. And the older I get, the more I really think about that with younger students, is that when they say something's really, really great, we don't want to correct them, because we know that, okay, yeah, maybe it is, but in their mind, that may be the greatest thing that they've ever played. And if they have that kind of experience, that they can think about and look back on it, 20 years later and say, that performance was so meaningful to me, then I think we need to let them have that, because it's so important to them. And as they get older, they'll, you get a little bit pickier and you start to hear other performances that are even better. And so, maybe it lessens that one, but still. Now, the second part of that question is something that just happened to me this past summer. And it wasn't a performance, but it was a rehearsal for a performance. And I was in Mexico playing for this festival. And I was playing this piece of music that was very, very, very meaningful to me, touching. And it's the John Steinmetz sonata. It was interesting listening to his podcast that you guys did of how he created that piece. And it's almost like, I don't want to say for sure, but almost as if it happened by accident in the way that he put it together. I know it's much more complicated than that, but to have this piece of incredibly great depth, and to hear how I thought about doing this and that and this and that, and well, wow, what you put together was this incredibly powerful piece of music. And so I'm rehearsing it, and there's a part in the music where it comes to a big hit. It's the end of the second movement, and it ends with great power. And then the third movement is very poignant. And this pianist was just she wasn't quite getting it, and I said, well, we need to don't listen to me. You just play, and you just, and I'll listen to you, and we'll make it work. And we started playing. I said, okay, this is a good feeling. This is nice. Okay, this is working. It's really working. I look over, and she's just crying. She's just, her tears are just rolling down her face. And we kept off, and I'm playing, and I started crying a little bit too. And I was just like, oh my God, And at the end, we just embraced each other. And I was like, yes, that's what this piece is about. And that's what we have to give to the audience. And we played it that night, and we didn't quite get to the level of emotion that we had in the practice room, but it was still just a very, very powerful piece. And it's the one piece that I'll play where, you look out in the audience and people are crying. Mm-hmm. And I've never been able to do that before. So it's a memorable piece that, it happens multiple times, but that one rehearsal that we did this summer was just another one of those moments where you think to yourself, yeah, this is why we do it. This is why we go through the bad reads. This is why we practice. This is why we, crack on these notes and tell ourselves that we're terrible, and we go back in the room and question why we're doing this. And then we get on stage and things like that happen, and we realize, okay, this is why we're doing this. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, those are my golden moments. They are few and far between.
What advice do you have for a young musician who aspires to have a career like yours?
Learning how to be flexible and how to just kind of roll with the punches and stick with it, and understand that I think today we are in a very interesting place where there is so much positivity, which is a good thing. It's a great thing. But it can also get to a point where people do need to be how do I say it? As my professor once said, Will Dietz, he had this expression, and he was from Pennsylvania. So I never really understood this expression, but being from Pennsylvania, maybe what he said, you have to be ready for bear. And I was like, you mean like bear, like a grizzly bear? You have to be ready for bear. Just be ready for bear. And so I was like, okay, great. But what it means, I think, is that be ready for people to be mean to you. Mm-hmm. And that's going to happen at some point in your career. And try to have the confidence that, I wouldn't say confidence, but know that in your training and in your background that you can do this. And that when those points of adversity come up, just, you got to try to be the better person, and just, take it with a grain of salt, go back. If somebody says, man, you're just really out of tune, you don't know how to play your instrument, yeah, go cry for a little bit. But then, was that person having a bad day? Why were they so mean to me? Why, are they just a mean person? Maybe that's it too. Maybe they're biased against me for some reason or whatever, but try not to let it soak into your being, and, take what people say, go practice a little more, and come back and try to, just keep at it. Mm-hmm. And, because I'll tell my students too, I'll say, look, there are some people that are going to be mean to you in your career, and you've got to be able to cope with that in some way. And not everything is going to be rosy, and not everybody's going to tell you that you're the most fabulous bassoonist they've ever heard. In fact, they're going to be quite critical of you sometimes. And we have to be able to learn to take that criticism and again, with a grain of salt, If it's aimed at you in kind of a hateful manner, maybe look into what that person is. Is that person, like I said, are they having a bad day? Are they insecure themselves? Which is often the case. But just take it, try to move on as best you can. The other thing I would say to young, let's say, aspiring people who want, say, my job, college professor, is find a secondary area that you're really good at. Because the job of bassoon professor or oboe professor, where that's the only thing you do, they exist, but the people that get those jobs are usually the ones that have jobs already, And then if you're wanting to get into the game, find something that you're really great at as a secondary area, like music appreciation, like theory, oral skills. Maybe you play a little keyboard. What else can you teach at that university in order to help fill your job? Because that has saved my life more than one occasion. Mm-hmm. And I developed a real, passion for teaching general studies, things like music appreciation, classes full of non-majors, and it's been an extremely fulfilling part of my life, of my job. And had it not been for me to kind of think forward when I was going into this whole thing, that I might want to have a second, I wouldn't say a backup at all, but a second area where I can become marketable. And it's really helped.
So much fantastic advice. Scott, this has been a wonderful hour talking with you.
We're not over. Are we over? No. Oh.
Thank you so much for joining us on Double Redish.
Well, thank you both. Again, I'm really humbled. It's an honor.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please also join us on social media. And if you wouldn't mind rating and reviewing on iTunes, it helps us reach even more listeners. Galit, who's going to be joining us for our next episode?
We had the pleasure of speaking with Viola Wilmsen, principal oboe of the Deutsche Sinfonie Orchester Berlin, and we had an amazing chat that I cannot wait to share with all of you. Jacqui, it's time to end this nerd parade.
Go make reeds.
Lord willing and the creek don't rise.